Got it.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. This is the first session of the 2022 Analytics in Action series by Association Analytics. We're super excited if you're joining us back. If you've attended last year or if you're new to this, we're excited to have you here to watch the what we like to affectionately call the Bill and Greg Show. I'm going to give it probably another 30 seconds for everyone to get logged on. I'm Katrina McAfee. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager at Association Analytics. Like I said, we created this series based on your feedback, lots of different topics that you guys have suggested, and lots of different pain points over the years that our experts here and other experts at Association Analytics have experienced, heard from associations and our customers alike. So broad range of topics that we cover on this series. Probably do this about twice a month, sometimes every 3 weeks. So we'll talk about some other episodes we have coming up. In the meantime, we can get started. So today's topic that we are talking about is how to finally make analytics a priority. So I know we all talk a lot about all the things we want to do in the new year. And I know a lot of associations that are always talking about wanting to make analytics a priority. And for one reason or another, things get in the way, urgent things in the moment come up and, longer term strategic things get shoved to the side. I know I do this in my personal life with resolutions, which we'll talk about in a minute. So today is just Bill and Greg going to talk about how it's easier to get started than you think and kind of keep that train rolling. So here we have our experts, Bill and Greg. So they've both been in the association and software space for many, many years. I won't say the number, but they look pretty young still, right? I think they look pretty young still, but still lots of good experience for you guys to join and kind of hear their expertise on this topic. So we're super excited to get started, and I will turn it over to, I actually don't know which of you is starting this. Greg?
That's me. That's me. So while we think we're experts, you all are the real experts, and we need your help for this webinar today. We're going to be asking some questions. We'd love to see some answers in the chat. We're going to be taking some polls, and we'd love to hear from you on what your thoughts are. So as always, we'll do some quick intros. We're doing that now, getting up and running. We're going to talk about how to think about data as an asset, and hopefully we'll either start shifting your mentality behind that, or we'll start reinforcing some of the things that you believe, but give you a language and a toolkit to better communicate to those to others. Because I think commitment to be on the webinar today, you understand why data is valuable. What we want to help provide you is a toolkit to have those conversations with others, to really make that business case and figure out different ways to talk about them. Obviously, we'll summarize our key takeaways. We'll do some Q&A. We're here to hang out with you. As long as you want to ask questions, we'll be in the chat talking with you and answering them throughout. Always have to answer this because, believe it or not, people say, I saw that webinar. What do you guys do again? So we are Association Analytics. We're a software company that works exclusively with associations to help them make the most out of their data. Pulling all those disparate systems into one location, providing answers to tough questions about your organization, and visualizing that data to allow it to really tell a story on how you can leverage it to be most successful.
All right. Yeah, so let's get started with some conversation and a quick poll. So this is the time of year where we talk about resolutions, right? It's a new year, new start, right? We've turned over new leaves of all sorts, and we're going to make a lot of real progress here in 2022. So I want you to think, what are some of your resolutions that you made leading into the new year? And now we're, say 3 weeks into the year. Now we're going to think about how are your 2022 resolutions holding up? So I want to ask, go ahead and jump in the chat and give us a story. Tell us what your resolutions are, if you're willing to share. But mainly if you have one that's like already gone, right? It's already out the window, right? We're 3 weeks in and you've already blown it on this big diet that you planned, or you planned on saving a lot of money and you went out and splurged on something that you shouldn't have, something like that. Any kind of resolution that hasn't held up, with just a few weeks into the year. Don't be shy.
I've been working on mine. One was to exercise more often. There you go, Keith. And I've been able to make it 3 days a week for 2 weeks now. So that's been going well. The other was to make it a dry January, and I will tell you it's been a moist January so far. Good days and bad days, but we've been making it through. The weekends are tough.
Wow, that's good for you. I mean, I'm actually, I forgot about dry January. So I'm also doing dry January, and so far so good on that, 18 days in. And yeah, so exercise, that's also going okay for me. But I was telling you guys earlier that, so I've resolved this year and for the last, I don't know, 15, maybe 20 years to learn to play guitar. And, it's still, I guess I still have, the bulk of the year left to do it, but, almost a month in, haven't done the first thing towards learning to play guitar. And I know that even if I work really hard at it for the whole year, I'll probably just, really get started. But so it's not looking good there, right? So already some of the things that I planned are, the hope is fading for some of those things. So anyway, let's see,
how about this,
LinkedIn
Bill?
Learning.
What if we end the year with us playing a duet on guitar together?
Ooh. I won't commit to that today, but let's continue that conversation. No resolutions, no fails. Okay, well, Paul is setting the bar
I like
low.
journaling every day. That's a good one. Even just writing some thoughts down, that's a really smart one.
All right. Okay, so now we're going to have a quick poll, and I do mean quick. So everybody, get your mouse or your keyboard. Pay attention here. I'm going to go to the poll question in just a second, and when we do, it's going to give you 5 or 6 seconds to look at this because I don't want you to think too much about it. I want to get your quick initial response to our poll question, which is, what's your association's most valuable asset?
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
Siri didn't get that.
She doesn't get to participate.
Okay, that's enough.
Ooh.
Members. Okay. So we kind of teed you up a little bit. I was expecting to see a few more people say data, considering we had this part about data as an asset. But this is a good. This is good here. So we have employees 20%, members 50%. Not too surprising there. Our reputation and the tradition of our association 15%. Right. We can't ignore that. And data at 15%. Right. Nobody selected other, and nobody selected the building or any of their tangible type assets. So what do you think, Greg? Anything surprising there?
Not a surprise. Those are some of the answers I would expect. But let me challenge some of you. If you said members are our most valuable asset, what if we lose our member data and I don't know their email addresses or phone numbers and I can't renew them or communicate with them? Right? Are members still one of our most important assets if we don't know who they are and how to get in touch with them? We think about employees as our newest asset. We're going through the great resignation right now. What happens when some of those valuable employees retire or leave the profession and we hire new people? How do they get started? Are we going to give them that Excel spreadsheet that they used to use? Are we going to give them reports, or do we have analytics and dashboards? Have we documented our process? So while I agree that those are certainly valuable assets, I think one of the most important assets any organization owns is their data. Obviously, I'm a little biased about that because I've seen the benefits of it. But I think as a stopgap between, members leaving, employees resigning, data is one of those consistent things we can go back to time and time again and rely on it to be successful.
All right. Okay, thanks everybody for that. This is going to be helpful as we move forward. And one last thing, this is more of a question just for the chat than the poll, but what's one thing that you learned, right, about this is not a personal thing, this is more professional, that your association learned as a result of the pandemic, right? Because it's kind of an unprecedented time, right? I mean, seems weird to keep saying that, right? Because it's gone on so long, right? But this is a period where we've had to take stock, we've had to reevaluate some of the things that we thought were true before, and we've had to look at our data in a way, even if it's been, without sophisticated tools or things. We've had to go back and kind of reevaluate some things. So let's see. Virtual meetings can expand your attendance. Oh yeah, remote work, of course. I didn't even think of that one, surprisingly. I mean, that's should be the first thing, really. We need to be flexible.
I've learned that associations can move as quickly as they want on initiatives. When the virtual conference needs to happen, boy, that software can get put in place really quickly. It doesn't take a board meeting and a year to make that happen, does it? Yeah.
So Greg, what's one good thing you can think of that maybe one of our customers learned, right, or that they found out as a result of the pandemic?
Yeah, I think virtual meetings is one of the keys here. Coming from the meeting industry, everybody said virtual would cannibalize our physical meeting. It's the end of the physical trade show. It's never happening again. Virtual events are going to take over and crush everything. And that's not true. I was at a physical event in December, and I had a great time there in person. I've attended lots of virtual events and had a good time. I think there's separate ways we can operate. I think we can have both of them at the same time. I don't think they conflict with each other, to be honest.
Yeah, so we had a, some of our customers basically discovered, right? Maybe the hard way, maybe they knew this before, but they hadn't really looked into that their revenue mix was, and like many associations, right? It's overly weighted towards in-person events, right? And the thing about this is obviously you discovered that when your in-person event goes away or is kind of slashed dramatically, but one of the things that we took away from that is, that's information that was knowable, right? Before that, right? If you looked and you took action, based on that, that's something that could have been sort of planned for, maybe not prevented, but at least mitigated, right? In a sense, leading up to that. Okay, so let's talk about how we treat data as an asset.
Got it too. Sorry, but I think Andy and Cindy in the chat here got it, right? Meeting members where they are with the technology they want. Some members don't want to come to the physical event. They want to go to the virtual event. Some members don't want to communicate in person. They want to do it virtually, and offering those channels to people actually expands the pie, right? If you have kids and you can't fly across the country for a week-long conference, but you want to attend, why can't we give you a vehicle to attend in the way you want? And I think a lot of people are expanding their overall footprint in who they can meet now that they're going to some of those niches and really appealing to them.
Cool.
So let's think about data. Let's reframe our conversation and think about data as an asset. And I want you to challenge you, think about data as $100 bills, right? If you thought about data as a $100 bill, how would that change the way you think about data? If you changed from an old wallet to a new wallet, would you leave a bunch of $100 bills in your old wallet? Probably not, but sometimes when we move from one software platform to another, we're leaving a lot of that valuable data behind, right? What if I go visit a friend's house and I set my $100 bills down on the table and I leave? Do I take them with me, or do I just leave them there, right? So understanding how we think about data changes the way we treat it. If data were those $100 bills, every time you thought about it, you would try and understand that data better. You might treat it better. You might maintain it in a more usable fashion. You might restore that data like an old car we have as an asset. We might try and maintain that data and monitor it in a different way. Earlier, somebody was asking about your data retention policy, right? What is your money retention policy? Same thing. I keep that valuable asset forever. Just because that's money from a couple years ago doesn't mean I just let it disappear. I want to hold on to that and I want to leverage it as a valuable asset. I also want to keep it safe, right? We want our money to be in a secured bank that's backed up by FDIC, that we know what's happening with it. If we're keeping our data in these databases, do we trust the database? Is it secure? What if that server on premises crashes? Or what if that vendor we're using moves away and we can't leverage that platform anymore? Is our data safe? Is our valuable insight available to us? Or are we losing that asset that we had access to? And I think that's a different way to think about it. And hopefully it'll sort of spark some ideas the next time someone's talking about data and it's just going to go away. And you're like, whoa, those $100 bills aren't leaving our organization. We need to keep hold of those.
Yeah, agreed. So yeah, sort of sticking with that new wallet analogy for a sec, you definitely want to take your $100 bills with you. However, you don't want to take all those old receipts and all that old paper, right? That's not worth anything. So you want to keep track of the data, obviously, and take what's valuable, but leave behind what's as Mark would say, Mark Lowry. When you move, you don't take all your trash with you to the next house, right? You're gonna clean house on the way. Okay, so let's talk about the business case, right? Because that's a lot of what this webinar is about. And most people on here, like, they're kind of aware of the business case for analytics broadly. So we're not really going to make the general case for why you should do this, right? It's not an if, it's a when. So this is more about making a business case for doing it now, right? How do we get analytics and how do we get working with your data to the top of that priority list? And how do we articulate this to others, right? So we're going to go through all of these in some detail, but really quick, the first thing we do is we have to assess, right? So we have to know where we're coming from. We have to know where we are now. We have to, talk with our team members about what data they have and how they use it. We need that vision or the future state, right? What are the outcomes that we want to achieve? And then we can analyze return. So if we achieve those outcomes, right? If we achieve that vision, what does it mean? What does it look like for us in the organization? This is more like high level stuff. It's kind of like, qualitative, maybe directional in a sense, right? We don't necessarily get down to the exact dollars and cents of it in this stage. But then we have to weigh options, right? So we all know about opportunity costs, right? We have limited time, we have limited resources. If we do A, we may not be able to do B, right? So everything is a give and take. We have to compare them to each other. So we have to weigh it out. I mean, everybody knows analytics is a good idea, right? It's something that we'll do, but how does it compare to the other things that are on our plate for this year, right? Or for this period. So then we have to calculate. So we have to put it into numbers as much as we can. So this is kind of like the quantitative version of analyzing our returns. So but later we'll step through very high level idea of how we can go through an ROI calculator. And we're only going to really do this for the top few options, right? We're not going to try to do an ROI analysis on things that are way down the priority list. They sort of haven't passed the sniff test, so to speak, right? They didn't pass our qualitative analysis. So we're not going to waste time doing that. And then lastly, we've calculated, we have some numbers behind it, but still we need to get that go ahead, from the board or from the senior leadership team to move forward. And we have to be able to communicate that, right? So it's not enough to understand it for yourself. It's not enough even to calculate it. You have to be able to communicate that to not just the leadership, but very often to the staff as well in order to move this thing forward. So we'll talk a little bit about how to do that. Okay, so with that, we're going to jump into each one of these in a little bit more detail, starting with our current state assessment.
Your current state assessment is not a year-long process where you're documenting everybody's opinion about everything. This is a quick assessment about the current state. We want to ask our business users questions, and I think we should physically ask them questions, not send them a survey. Because the questions I'm asking are a little bit softer than a radio box or a check button. I want to ask some questions like, how do you feel about our data? What are the things you think our data empowers you to do? And where do you think the limits are? What data do you currently have access to? And I want to ask different departments this because I expect I'll get different answers, right? What data do you have at your fingertips? What data do you wish you knew? What are the questions you really would like to have answers to? And I'm documenting this and I'm thinking about this. And then I say, well, what tools are available to you, right? What tools might you require to have access to those? And then I want to talk about process. Like, okay, if you have a question about that number, how do you get it? If you've been a part of our series before, we've role played some of these conversations before about like, hey, what was the email open rate on that event promotion? It's like, well, it wasn't as good as we thought it was. What's the process of getting access to that information? Is that an email chain to 5 other people and a week later I have the answer? Or is that answer at your fingertips quickly? Just where are we today? Because if we can't figure out where we are today, we don't know how moving forward is going to work.
All right. So once we have our current state, we have to look at the future state, right? And the future state is really all about outcomes. And in our conversations where we talk about this, they can almost always be boiled down to 4 buckets, right? 4 things, right? It's consistent, trusted data. That's probably number 1. Efficiency, right? We're spending a lot of time doing things manually. We want to improve on that. We obviously want to grow revenue and improve our operational performance. And then things that are more strategic, right? We have the strategic plan. We have to improve in these areas. But how does our work really reflect that, right? How do we connect the data we collect and all of that to achieving our strategic goals? So these are the outcomes that we're looking for, right? There might be some others, but by and large, they're all going to be related to one of these 4. And if we achieve this vision, right? If these outcomes come to pass, then that's going to bring us certain returns, right? And those returns, again, there's lots of ways of looking at this, but there's going to be some short-term returns that we will notice right away, and then there's going to be longer-term returns. So let's take a quick look at both of those. So short-term. So the first thing we're going to notice is revenue, right? So Greg was talking earlier about the customer that that realized something at kind of midstream while they were marketing for their events, and they were able to find additional registrations and make more money off this event. So there's more people at your events. There's low-hanging fruit for non-dues revenue, things that you can sell. Maybe you retain a few more members, not enough to really move the needle on lifetime value or anything, but a few more members than you otherwise would, right? You're gonna have more time, right? Your knowledge workers, you have smart people that are spending time doing some more manual type tasks. So you're gonna get them doing more impactful things rather than creating and consuming a lot of reports. You're gonna have fewer mistakes, right? So you have less error prone methods, more accurate data, more trusted, better decisions, faster. You're gonna notice right away, marketing reach and performance is better, right? This improves over time, but segmenting and targeting, right? We all have problems with that. Every association does, but this is something that you'll notice right away. Have an uptick in your click-through rate, in your open rates, right? You'll be sending your messages right at the right time, with the right subject, things like that. And then lastly, the culture shift, right? So this is slow, but I think you can notice the early signs right away in the best cases, right? So we're starting towards adoption, we're challenging assumptions. Just the fact that we've implemented, some tools or even some processes, even if it's something as simple as, sharing this manually compiled spreadsheet, between departments where it had previously been siloed, is something that's a marker of a cultural shift, which can be a great short-term return.
Bill, a couple comments on this. One about more time. I go back to a survey that ASAE did at Annual over the summer last year. Their question was, what is the #1 constraint to you achieving your mission? And it was capacity. We just don't have enough people to do all the things they need to do every day. And then we think about, well, what are our people doing? And unfortunately, sometimes they're spending time running a report, punching that in Excel. And I always think about getting our cooks back in the kitchen, right? You have this highly trained, experienced, graduate degree, knowledge worker making a ton of money a year, and you're paying them to put things in Excel, right? Like, that's not necessarily the best use of their time. How do we get them back in the kitchen and out of the prep room? And I think that's an important one. Another one you talked about here is revenue. And I think a great example of that is AANA, nurse anesthetists. Eric O'Connor there, the chief growth officer, he said that associations are sitting on a gold mine of data. And he said, by seeing that data, we were able to adjust our approach to a meeting. And we ended up profiting $70,000, and the meeting wasn't looking that promising. So he was able to identify midstream that a meeting wasn't on track, figure out why it wasn't on track, get it back on track, and ultimately profit. And that's one of those things that seeing that your meeting's not on track after it occurs is too late. It's too late to fix that meeting if we're doing that afterwards. We need to know in real time what's going on with these programs. So then let's think about long-term results, because investing in analytics, while it can have quick wins, we're really playing the long game here, right? We want to understand some of those less tangible things like member engagement. Now, we can put a dollar number between member engagement, but as a nonprofit and as an association, we really want to engage the members because it's in our mission, right? Mission-driven organizations want to improve engagement. And if we can't measure it, how are we going to improve that engagement? And we don't want members who join for a year and then leave. We want lifetime members, right? We want to understand, how do we engage a member to get them to be more loyal to us, to come back and participate year and year over again. And if we're measuring snapshot in time reports, we can't see that person go from phase to phase. We just see them show up in a snapshot here or there, but we can't put those snapshots together. We can't connect the dots on their member journey. We can't understand lifetime value, right? We talked about being trapped in your system. When you change wallets, do you move the money with you? Of course you do, right? But if all that money was in the bank and I just had my credit card on the wallet, it almost wouldn't matter, right? So infrastructure stability, the idea that the platforms you have can be switched in and out without having to worry about losing data or not having access to your data. Strategic alignment can be a huge one. And this is a great example. I'll let Bill tell the story in a minute, but understanding how our organization is going strategically, like what is our long-term vision? Not 2 months or 2 years or 10 years down the road. Like, where do we want to be, and how do we plan on measuring that process? And then just data literacy. I was on a call earlier today, and I was talking about how many members do you have, and they were saying we have different definitions. Different departments tell us that the answer is different depending on what their answer should be today, right? Our publications number says one thing, our financial department says one number, our membership says another number, our website has a third number, and our board just wants to know how many members we have, right? The ability to say, well, here's how many members we have, We all understand what that means. These are all long-term outcomes of having access to our data.
Yeah, so I think just a quick comment on data literacy. I mean, I can tell just from doing these, like over the past year, and even before when we were doing it during initially during COVID times, at least among the community of people that are participating in our things and the prospects that we talk to, I think data literacy is definitely improving. I mean, drastically, really, in the association space in general. And so when you think about this one, this is like, most of the people that are on here are, the experts, right? The subject matter experts in your organization. But getting started with something like this, right? Kind of moving it over the goal line, so to speak, from something that just, you and a handful of people really appreciate and know about, to something that is embraced by the whole organization. The data literacy of the broader staff, of really like everyone else, is going to improve dramatically. So that, I think that's a really good outcome here. So so I'll put you on the spot, Greg. Can you think of a good story for a long-term return that we've seen from use of data or and analytics?
Yeah, I can think of one, and this is a conversation I had with our friend Reggie Henry at the ASE Tech event, and I was talking to him about the use of Acumen and how it's impacted their organization. And he said one of the biggest changes I saw over time was how we communicate and work with the board. He said, before they would sort of talk in abstracts, and we would tell them things were happening and say, great. Now, every time they talk about something, they say, show me the data, right? Hey, we were able to increase engagement at our virtual event. Show me the numbers. How many did we get? Hey, we bought this new software platform and it really moved the needle. Our members seem to love it. Prove it to me, right? If we invested in that solution, show me in the data that that's happening. And he said it's made it a lot easier for them as a professional staff to execute on their goals, because they understand their goals more clearly. These are the things we want you to achieve. Here's how we plan on measuring that. You can easily see if you're doing what they're asking or not, because we're changing the type of conversation we have from a head in this direction to go to these coordinates, right? Increase member engagement. Well, how do I measure that? How do I track that? How do you want me to report back on that? That can be challenging if we don't have analytics at our fingertips.
Right, great point. Good story. Okay, so now we've looked at some of our outcomes, right? We've looked at the returns, right? So if those outcomes come to pass, what kind of returns can we get? So now we have a sense that analytics is starting to seem like a good idea, right? We have these short and long-term returns that we can look forward to, but I bet, right? And one of the reasons that that not every association has kind of jumped on board with this yet is you have other things going on, right? You have to weigh some options, you have to evaluate things, right? So, we see that there's digital transformations and all the things those entail, right? There's a lot of associations have an initiative to launch a new website that takes up a lot of resources, right? There's AMS transitions and things like that. Yeah, I mean, what are some other things that people are working on, right? What are some of the big initiatives that take up a lot of time and effort that might distract from something like analytics or another priority? Just if there's something happening in your association or something that you run into a lot, go ahead and mention that in the chat. I think we mentioned some of the big ones, but the main message here is you need a system to evaluate these things, right? So everything, AMS conversion, of course, right? Everything is a good idea, but you still have to decide, among good ideas, which one is the best and which one deserves your resources right now. And there's lots of ways of doing this. There are tools that are built for this purpose, but most often it's some kind of a matrix, right? It's a spreadsheet or something where essentially what you're doing is you're plotting or you're weighing business impact versus complexity and cost, right? So what's it gonna mean for us, and what's it gonna cost us in terms of money and time and effort and complexity in order to get there. So so it's some kind of matrix like this, right, where you're looking at different options. Maybe you're high. If you're lucky enough to have something that's high impact and low complexity, right, then obviously that's something that's gonna go to the top of your list. And likewise, something that's low impact and, even if it's low complexity, you'll probably never do that, right? So you don't really have a lot of things down here in the low business impact area. Okay, so whatever works for your association, this can be complicated. It can be, it can be sort of high level. It can be even a conversation with some good notes taken, right? But some way to evaluate different options against each other. And so once we've done that, we need to decide, right? So now we've decided, right? We're going to prioritize data. We're going to prioritize analytics. But now we have to do what? We have to get the budget approved, right? And so we need to know just, I mean, so we know it's a good idea, but how good is it, right? Should we spend $1,000 or should we spend $1 million, right? I mean, is it this something, what kind of return can we get on this? So, and this is the point where we have to get to a calculation, right? Any comments on evaluation before we move on to calculating stuff?
Yeah, I think a couple of things are important here. One is to agree upon a framework that we all agree upon. And my priority that I put forth into this framework may not get approved, but I feel like as long as we all have buy-in on the framework itself, we should all have buy-in on what pops out of the framework. And then I think, how does this apply to my personal life, right? One parent says, we need to get a new car. I've got to be able to drive to work. This thing keeps breaking down. The other parent says, we've got to model we've got to remodel the kitchen, right? I can't make healthy meals for our family in here. And then the kids are screaming, we need a new entertainment system, right? Do we end up just buying the entertainment system for the kid because they're the loudest ones in the room? Or do we really prioritize what's important to our family overall, right? Instead of buying that new entertainment system, can we get two of these priorities in? Can we get half of one and a little bit of the other? What's going to make everybody most happy, and how are we all going to be effective? Now, this is challenging because if we just say complexity, we're saying, well, Keith's new AMS is probably the most complex thing we should do. We should push that off forever. Let's get a new website. That sounds like a fun option, right? But is getting a new website going to have that business impact that you think it should have, right? Is that going to really solve all of our challenges? I don't know. I don't know your answers, but what I would say is when you create that framework, just agree to it. Hey, this is how we're going to evaluate things. Regardless of if my priority wins or not, we think this framework makes sense, so we can all agree that the outcomes make sense.
All right. Okay, so let's look at calculating, right? So again, we're not going to calculate for every single for every single option, right? But just as far as analytics are concerned, right? Because that's what we're talking about today. How are we going to calculate this? So there's a lot of talk about lifetime value, and there's some different variations on how we calculate it, but by and large, it's something like this, right? So the lifetime value, the aggregate lifetime value of all of our members, right, or our customers, it's going to be the count of members or customers, times how much they spend, right, how much revenue they generate, times the average tenure. And so then, we're talking about aggregate. So this is not just the lifetime value of Greg or Bill. This is the lifetime value of all the members that you have right now. Okay, so it's not an exact science, right? We have to use averages, and sometimes we have to fill in some things that we don't know with assumptions, and that would look something like this, right? So we have on the left, we have our inputs, right? And there's two kinds of inputs. The first part, the member value, is how do we get to that aggregate lifetime value? We need to know, how many members we have today, what's our retention rate, how much do they spend, what is their average tenure, how many members do we acquire each year, right? So we're losing some to churn. How many new ones do we acquire? And maybe sometimes if you have information on this, you could look at the average cost, right? So maybe instead of just looking at top line, you could look at revenue minus cost, times number of members times tenure, right? And that would be maybe even a little bit more accurate way of doing this, right? And the second thing is, remember, we're going to save a lot of time, right? So we're going to implement some new processes, some new tools maybe, and they are going to take some time to learn and to adopt initially, but they're going to save us a lot of time, right? We're not going to be spending as much time creating reports, and this one is overlooked a lot, right? So it's easy to say, okay, we have 4 people, they spend all day making reports, and we can cut that down to half their time making reports, right? So that's interesting, right? That's already a savings. But what about all the people that consume those reports, right? Everyone else in the organization, right? So what about the times when, Greg sends me a report and I have a question, and I email Greg and say, Greg, I have a question, and he gets back to me 3 days later, with a new copy of the report. So I've wasted basically 3 days trying to find the answer to a question that in other circumstances I could have, maybe found in a few minutes. And so there's a lot of inefficiencies there that we're going to solve. And all of those, again, getting back to opportunity costs, all those inefficiencies have cost, right? Some people cost more than others, but you can use an average for a cost per hour and say, look, if we can just cut all this time, by X%, right, times some dollar value, this is how much we're going to save in optimization. And I can almost guarantee you that just that alone is going to be enough to pay for your solution, right? Or very close to it. And then all the other things about, keeping more members, making them more loyal and happy and staying longer and spending more, and all of that is going to be kind of icing on the cake. So we have these inputs, and that's going to give us outputs, which are, our aggregate lifetime value currently. We're going to look at that in the future, kind of based on some of those outcomes that we talked about, right? So we'll be able to compare the future to our current. We'll be able to calculate some optimization savings based on the time and effort that we're going to save. And all of that is going to lead us to this high level return on our analytics investment. And so we're almost there, right? We're at the goal line, basically, right? So we've kind of qualitatively gone through everything. We've even gone so far as to calculate, dollars and cents, right? What's going to be the return on this investment? And and granted, it's still somewhat directional in nature, but it's way more scientific than the process that we normally go through, to decide on these kinds of things. And now what we have to do is communicate it to the people that matter, right? It's the senior leadership team, it's the board, and it's really just all the staff in general, because it's going to take everybody to make this successful. So how do we do that, Greg?
This is where we fumble the ball at the 1 yard line. We've done all the hard work to get there, and we fail to communicate effectively to the people making the decisions. And this can be really frustrating. I think we fail to communicate on a couple reasons. One is, let's be honest, if you understand the value of data and you're trying to communicate that value in a data language, you're talking the wrong language to the wrong person. So I'll give you a really easy example to understand. We've got our Bitcoin logo here. 5 or 6 years ago, everybody has this smart friend who said you should invest in Bitcoin. And they argued about the blockchain and the value of decentralized monetary, and it's going to be the future. Wrong argument for me, right? All you have to do is say, listen, you have investments. You want to diversify your portfolio. Stocks and bonds, 401k is one option. Here's another option with potential good upside. Less risky than you think. Take a couple dollars and invest it in Bitcoin. It'll be a good strategy. That communicating in a language they can understand is going to work versus trying to explain blockchain technology to them. That's not what they understand. So we go back to our example of, do you want an enterprise data warehouse? No, I don't want one of those. What does that even do? Versus, do you want better insights to run your business? Do you want to increase productivity, decrease, your member, your staff time that they're spending on this? Is that what you want? Yeah, that's what I want. Great. Here's a tool that helps you get there. So changing the language we speak to them in a way that they understand can be really important. Directional or definitive. So Bill is a numbers guy, right? He's talking about ROI and the numbers, lifetime value, calculating that. That's going to work for a certain percent of people. Some people we talk to, their brain is a numbers-driven data brain. Other people we talk to are a feelings brain, right? And we have to understand what side of the brain is this person using to make a decision. And sometimes we just have to talk directional. Hey, we're going to measure and improve engagement, which is ultimately our goal. These can be a different way to have that conversation, but that's the way that person wants to be communicated to. And that's the best way to communicate to them then, right? Be clear on your assumptions. If we're making assumptions, we just have to be clear. What are our definitions? What are we going to improve? Why are we going to improve it? How do we plan on improving that? And then don't forget to talk about the intangibles. It's not just, hey, we measured our event attendance was up and that was good, but like, what's it worth to improve your reputation as an association? What's it worth to improve your member experience? I'll give you a really great intangible. You just hired that millennial, fresh out of college. I guess they're not millennials, they're probably Gen Z. You hired that Gen Z.
You did that 15 years ago, right?
We're getting there. You hire that Gen Z or fresh out of college, and they start really excited on day one, and you say, here's an Excel spreadsheet you have to enter numbers in. How long is that person sticking around for, right? Are we attracting and retaining the best talent to work at our organization if we're not providing them modern tools to be able to do their job? That's an intangible that you can't measure. I guarantee they're on Monster looking for another job 10 minutes later. They're not going to enter data in your Excel spreadsheet forever, right? But then you don't just have to communicate yourself. It's not a one-way communication street. Use the community. Get your friends to jump on there. When we think about voice, our voice doesn't always have the biggest impact. A lot of times others' voices have a big impact. That's why we bring up partners of ours who've already done it, but use third-party studies. Hey, Gartner and Forrester said this is important. Use examples that they deal with on their regular daily life. Hey, you use Netflix, right? They do a lot of data. You're an Amazon customer. You buy stuff from them all the time. Why? Because they're using data to successfully market to you. They're not using demographics to segment you. They're using behavior. We can do that too. We should be doing this. Use case studies, use examples, use references, use all these things at your fingertips. Realize that you're not communicating alone. You've got a community of people to communicate to. I almost guarantee that a friend of yours at an association can talk to your team about why analytics has been beneficial. How many of you buy something without calling your friends and asking them, right? Use those people in the communication process to articulate what you're trying to say in different words.
Good. Yeah, so that's probably the number one question that we get is, what are other associations doing, right, when it comes to certain things? And so to the extent you can answer that and be prepared for that question, it's going to go a long way towards getting what you want, which hopefully by now we're all on the same page and we all want to, work with improve our data related initiatives in the coming year. Okay, so now we've kind of cleared for takeoff here, right? So we've communicated to the board. We know that this is something that we want to do, but still, we still don't have a very big team and it still seems overwhelming to do this. And we're not sure exactly if we can bite off this whole thing in the coming year. So not to worry, right? I mean, this is still something that we're going to do in phases, and it doesn't really matter, where you are right now. If you're crawling, if you're walking, there's something that you can do right away to advance all this. So this is kind of like a little bit of a embellished version of the crawl, walk, run, sort of thing that we talk about, as it relates to analytics. So in this case, when you're crawling, you're still just planning, right? You're assessing, you're inventorying your data, you're looking at ways to collect. You're still in the process of really prioritizing things. A lot of us are kind of in that walk stage right now, right? We have the reports from our individual source systems. We have spreadsheets where we export things to Excel to do some analysis, and we have data, but it's siloed, right? It's the membership team has their data, events has their data, and they very rarely mix. And when they do, it's with great effort, right? So this guy that's sort of on the starting blocks here, he's ready for analytics. I think a lot of us are probably here as well. We have data, but it's manually compiled. We're starting to share it. Maybe we have that shared drive, or SharePoint, something like that. We put our spreadsheets there and everybody looks at them. And sure, it's a hassle when people edit your spreadsheet and mess things up, but still it's better than just requesting things by email or handing papers and things like that. And then there's the source integrations, right? So you're not quite at a data hub or data warehouse or things, but you've integrated some stuff back to your AMS, right? So a lot of us are in that stage, and that's already good. You're already, making progress. I mean, so if you're there, and I think many of us are in that stage right now, the good news is you're almost ready to run, right? You have a lot of the building blocks, a lot of the foundations in place, so that if you get things prioritized, you get that budget approved, you can really start to run, right? So when you do, that's when you get a tool, most likely, right? Not necessarily, but most likely, it means you're getting a tool. You're figuring out a way to automatically compile your data, so you're not doing it manually anymore. Probably have a standard data model, right? So everything goes into this central repository with the standard model. There's shared reports, which hopefully are visual, hopefully are interactive. And even if they're not, you still have a way you have all of those demographics, you have all those dimensions. You can slice and dice your data by different things, right? So, you can very quickly, slice your purchasing data by region or by age bin, right? You can, find those millennials, that Greg was talking about. You can prioritize them. You can target them, with a very specific call to action that's different from what you might send out to everyone else. And then lastly, this is like a bit beyond the run. Like, so and I would say that the run is, there's a lot of ways to break that up, right? I mean, this could have gone long, right? So the run could be like a light jog to everything up to a sprint, which means, maybe you start with, even if you've decided to go forward with implementing that tool, you don't have to do everything at once, right? You start with your AMS, you start with the critical data, gradually bring in other data. Maybe you do third-party data at some point, right? This can be a several-year project in some cases, right? You get very quick returns, but then you incrementally improve that over time. And eventually, it's like even running is not fast enough, right? You're on the bike or in the race car or something, whatever analogy you want to use. But the idea is now you're doing advanced things. You're doing predictive analytics. You're doing like real mathematical forecasting, what if analysis of, scenario analysis for different types of things that you want to look at, different scenarios that you want to look at for your business. Maybe you have an automated recommendation system, right? So now you have that Netflix or that Spotify or Amazon type experience where you're recommending that next action, that next piece of content to members automatically based on all this data that based on all this interactions and all this data that you have on them. And that's obviously, that's something that gets exciting, right? You know that technology exists because you sort of observe that in your life as a consumer and as a member and subscriber to other things, but you want to bring that to your member experience in your association as well.
Bill, can I just start? I don't want to go through all those steps. Can I just start with predictive analytics and recommendation engine?
No, sorry, Greg, you can't do that. Unfortunately, no. So, the idea is that all of those, the technology is not necessarily that complicated, but the point is you need a lot of inputs, right? You need a lot of data in order to make those things work, right? So when, think about when you first sign on to Netflix, right? You make that new profile. What do they recommend for you? The same stuff that they recommend to everyone, right? The top 10. But as you start to watch stuff, they learn more about you and they start to recommend things that are the things that you'll actually like, right? And so your recommendation system, your predictive analysis, it kind of requires some historical data to go on. You have to have several years of behavioral data and demographics and things in order to be able to project out into the future what's likely to happen, whether it's a renewal, an attendance, maybe a purchase or donation, any of those things.
And Bill, for our friends on the call today, at what point in here should I start looking at a vendor like A2 to help out?
So mainly we're talking about here-ish, right? So if you're at a point where you're pretty effectively using your source system data, you're compiling some things manually, you have some processes for sharing data between departments, even if they don't work perfectly, right? Maybe you have some integrations with your AMS, or at least you've talked about it, and you've maybe you decided not to do it, right, because of the expense or the complexity, but you kind of understand that there's a need to have that. And so, and in any of those cases, that would be a good time to talk to A2 or look at tools like Acumen. All right. Cool. Yeah. So we're getting ready to go to key takeaways, and we'll have some time for Q&A after that. So go ahead and if there's any questions or anything, go ahead and think about those and pop them into the chat now, and we'll get to everything. So we'll let Greg take us away with key takeaways.
What did we learn today? We don't know how to get to where we're going if we don't know where we are. So you've got to understand where you are. A lot of times our perspective of where we are becomes reality, but we don't take the time to figure out what other people's perspective is to build a consensus on reality, right? I have great reports. I don't need any of this. Well, what are my team members telling me, right? What is the data I really have access to and don't? Where are my challenges and struggles? If we're not assessing what our current state is, we're not really sure of why we should or shouldn't move forward. So I'd say ask people, talk to your teammates. What are they doing? What's frustrating them? What are they struggling with? Get an understanding of that. Focus on the data you have. I guarantee you have more data you're not using than data you're missing. This is huge. So many organizations go, I need to get more data before I have Acumen. I need to clean up all my data. Just focus on the data you have. There's insights in there that you're not able to get that'll lead you to the future insights you're looking for, right? There is no such thing as perfect data. Create your own matrix for scoring and thinking. What is your decision-making process? How do you weight things? Figure that out for yourself, and then be true to your process and follow what the outputs say. Whether you get the new entertainment center you're looking for or not, it's going to benefit the family as a whole if we agree upon how we're going to be making decisions and be transparent about it. I think this is one of those areas where if senior leadership just says, these are our priorities, we're doing this, but we don't communicate why or why not, it can put a bad taste in the employee's mouth that my priority didn't get agreed upon because they don't like me. Well, it's not that. It's this is what the inputs were. This is what the outputs were. We were transparent about that. That's why we made these decisions. And then consider opportunity costs. When you think about costs, I don't want you to just think about money, dollars and cents. I want you to think about time and capacity today and long term. I want you to think about what is not having this do, right? What are we missing out by not having this type of solution? And then take that phased approach. Of course, how do you eat an elephant is one bite at a time. But on the same side, when is the best time to plant a tree? The answer was 20 years ago, but the other answer is right now, right? So we want to understand, what does that phased approach look like? If we want that beautiful, I have this beautiful tree in front of my house that blooms all the time. I didn't plant that yesterday. That was planted 20 years ago, right? That you have to think ahead of time. Where do we want to be in 5 to 10 years? Do we think data and analytics is going to be important to our association in 10 years from now? I would argue, of course, right? Do we think we're going to have more data over time? Of course. So we need to get started now on that phased approach, because we can't just start with predictive analytics and recommendations. We've got to build up to that.
All right. Yeah, so we got one question in the Q&A from Niru, who asks, how do we build internal consensus to use analytics? I'll give you first shot, Greg.
Yeah, step one is understanding the decision maker's priorities. So if we're going to make an argument to achieve those priorities, we have to understand what they are. Step two is understanding how to communicate effectively with those people, right? If we're going to communicate to decision makers, how do they think? How do they make decisions? In the past, when they've made decisions, how has that worked? It's one step at a time. You got to fill that bucket up with a lot of drips of water to get it full. It's not just one argument. It's a constant argument. It's not one time. It's multiple times. It's that squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? If I can constantly show you these are pain points we're running into that this solution solves, my priority tends to get moved up, because we can show the value. We can show why this is an important decision to make.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think social proof is kind of important here. If we're trying to build consensus, again, this is, for a lot of the people on the call here, it's not that I have to convince you, right? It's that you have to convince others in your organization, including leaders. So we talked a lot about how you convince the leaders, today, right? You have a standard way of evaluating options. You show them some ROI. You kind of discuss all the intangibles that go along with it, right? You speak to them in a language that they're going to understand. All of that is great. And so now you move forward with this thing, but how do you make sure, not that it's only your job to make sure, right? But how does the organization make sure that other people will adopt it, right? Because all of that ROI and all of that, all of those outcomes will never come to pass if people don't use the tool and don't adopt the processes that you put in place, right? And so the social proof aspect is, if the reason that I wouldn't adopt it is because I think it's difficult, right? I have a process, I'm doing something, and I need to be convinced that investing a little bit of time to learn something new is going to be a net improvement for me, right? It's going to make my life easier. And so that's how you do it, right? Is you adopt it yourself. You show that it works. You show that it makes things easier, faster, et cetera. And that, and all the other things, right? I mean, there's entire webinars, right, about culture change and adoption and, promotion of the benefits of analytics and all of that. But at the end of the day, at the individual level, what people care about is, does this make my life easier or not? And you have to show them that it will, and it will, right? It's just a matter of getting people to see it. Great question. Anything else? Got a lot of people still hanging around here. There must be at least one question.
As we're waiting for them to type in their next question, you talked about cultural change. We did a webinar on that earlier. It's on our YouTube channel. If you like the content you saw today, go check out some of our other content. We've got a lot of great sessions we've run so far. Some of them might be directly applicable to your ROI, and we can talk to you about how to calculate it. The other thing about our YouTube channel if you're one of those people watching this on YouTube right now, not the people in attendance, and you're watching this webinar on YouTube, send me an email. It's greg@getacumen.com, and I'll send you something cool in the mail. I want to do a social test and see if we get any takers on that one. So if you're watching this right now on YouTube and you've made it this far, thank you. Send me an email, greg@getacumen.com, and I will send you something really cool. I've already got it picked out. I'm excited to see who wins.
All right. So speaking of sending things that are cool, as we go to a couple of quick notes on our upcoming things, don't forget, we still have a wall to decorate, right? We've talked about that a little bit at the end of last year. You know, Omicron has pushed us back out of the office, you know, temporarily. We're going to be doing webinars back from the office. We have a big wall that's mostly blank. There's lots of real estate available there, you know, for you to send in cool things, work appropriate things. We'll put those on the wall, get some free publicity there. So we do have a webinar coming up on the 27th. This is a partner webinar, and we're going to talk about predictive analytics, right? You know, you know, again, you're running, right? Or bike riding, I guess, at that point. But reducing member churn with predictive analytics. So this is a little bit of an advanced topic, but we'll talk about that with Fionta, who is one of our partners, right? And then the next installment of our how-to series is quick wins, right? And so that's very it's very relevant to today's topic, right? Some of those short-term benefits and things. So what are the quick wins you can get, right? And this is even after you got the decision to go forward, but how do you prioritize, you know, what to do first, right? How do you build that momentum, right? To make sure you keep that that consensus, that adoption, right? That Nira was asking about. Very important, right? The order matters, right? If you do something big and complex and boring, like right at the beginning, people are going to lose interest, and the momentum of the project is going to, you know, go in the wrong direction, right? So we want to get some quick wins right away, get people interested, get people motivated, and that's going to help us out a lot with our future adoption, right? So that is February 9th, 3 p.m. So hopefully we'll see you there. All right. I don't see any other questions right now. So if I'll give Greg a chance for a final word. Otherwise, we'll see you guys again here in a couple weeks.
I want to thank everybody who attended today. We really appreciate your attendance. For those who dropped comments and questions in the chat, we really appreciate that as well. We run these sessions because you all give us good feedback on the survey. So we're going to send you a survey and ask you how you thought. If you have any topics you'd like us to tackle, let us know. Challenge us with some hard stuff. If you have anything you'd love to learn, Bill and I will do the research and create the content for you and put it together and present. We do these because you all like them. So if you keep attending and enjoying them, we'll keep doing them. I want to thank everybody so much for attending. Have a great rest of your day. Have a great rest of your week. And I will see you in the future.